Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to On the Same, Jocund Twain, and of course you can hear the distant rhyme between same and Twain, and rarely, it's interesting how rarely Whitman plays that game. This is poem number 4 of the 31 of Goodbye My Fancy. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, our playlist, and you were able to see our intro to Goodbye My Fancy, the cluster, and we just finished with Goodbye My Fancy, the first poem of the 2 poems that actually are included in this cluster. Now, our Nortons will tell us that this manuscript was included, it did include an early draft and proof sheet, and 4 pages including trial lines, rough draft, and a final draft that was dated May the 10th of 1890. It was published first in Goodbye My Fancy, 1891. Now, you'll remember that Jocund will get used 4 times prior to this. Warble for lilac time will come to mind. And the word twain will be twinned in an interesting way in this poem, so we're going to pay attention to that. On the same, ye Jocund Twain. Notice Jocund here, like the word light-hearted, afoot and light-hearted, I take to the open road, song of the open road. My life and recitative containing birth, youth, mid-age years. You'll remember recitative used a number of times, 8 times altogether in Leaves of Grass. Notice that you got your 3s here with birth, youth, and mid-age years. And then fitful as motley tongues. You'll remember this word motley from after the sea ship. Motley tongues of flame. We saw a lot of referencing to flame in drum taps, didn't we? Inseparably twined and merged in one. This idea of twining, this idea of vines, we saw that several times, haven't we? And especially Song of Myself. Merged in one, combining all. So it's always about coming back, taking 2 to make one, coming together. And then he says, my single soul, aims, confirmation, failures, joys. You'll remember joys from Mystic Trumpeter 8. Nor single soul alone. In other words, Whitman is like, it's almost like at the end of his poetry, he wants to start to reach out and hug and embrace. I told you that's such an important motif in Leaves of Grass. Everyone and everything. It's quite a remarkable thing, which is why we call him an integralist thinker, for sure. And then he'll say it. I chant my nation's crucial stage. Now the idea of stage here is phasing, as well as of course the idea of drama and standing on a stage, performing on a stage. And then in parenthetics he uses the word America again. I told you guys, it's not regularly or often that he does this in all Leaves of Grass. Haply humanities, America's haply humanities. And then we're back out of the parenthetics. The trial. And again, this will, for us, be central to the way in which we think about all of history for Whitman. Think about the way in which Lincoln's Gettysburg Address played the same thing, whether that nation or any nation can long endure. The trial, great. The victory, great. A strange éclaircissement, that is to say, an enlightening explanation. Obviously, this is the only time that word gets used in Leaves of Grass. Of all the masses past, and mass, of course, is one of the early words of Leaves of Grass, right? The Eastern world, the ancient, medieval, here, and then he repeats the word here. Here from wanderings, strayings, lessons, wars, defeats, back to our notion of theodicy. Why did the war have to happen? Wars, defeats. Here at the West, a voice triumphant, justifying all. Now, the voice, we're going to argue, is probably Whitman's voice, namely these poems. In other words, by the end of Leaves of Grass, he wants to make the argument that this collection of poems has attempted to try to explain American history. If you want to know what it is to be an American, pick up Leaves of Grass and read it in its entirety. That, I think, Whitman would agree with. Justifying all. A gladsome pealing cry, only time gladsome ever gets used in Leaves of Grass. It's right here. Remember we said about him, he wants to keep on the sunny side of life. A gladsome pealing cry, a song for once of utmost pride and satisfaction. Obviously, patriotism is central to our reading of Leaves of Grass, as we have said. I chant, he's back to it again, I chant from it the common bulk. In other words, this is all about Whitman. Go back to I Hear America Singing. He's always emphasizing what's common about us is what's unique about us. The general average horde, again, his use of the word average. And then in parenthetics, the best no sooner than the worst. In other words, Both sides of the discussion always are apart, starting from Pomenock 7 comes to mind, obviously. And now I chant for the third time, old age. Obviously, he's getting old. And then in parenthetics, he'll say it. My verses written first for forenoon life, so he's back to the staging idea again. Forenoon life, and for the summer's, autumn's spread. I pass now to snow white hairs. Again, that's ironic because he had snow white hairs at 30 and beyond, right? The same, and give to pulses winter cooled the same. In other words, he's trying to capture in one moment all of American history, the beginning, the middle, and obviously the future, and then as well his own life, the beginning, the middle, and for him it is a future, right? Because of the way he sees and thinks about death. As here, in Careless Trill, you'll remember this word trill from Song of Myself too, and my recitative, so he comes back to the word one more time. Again, his the influence of opera can't be overstated. With faith and love, wafting to other work, this idea of wafting, again, his aroma, the idea of aroma in olfactory he's played with, to unknown songs, the future, conditions, on, and now the title, Ye Jocund Twain, exclamation point, continue on the same, exclamation point. It's interesting that his first line, his last line is where these exclamation points exist and nowhere else in the poem. Well, what exactly do you think it is that he's doing here? Well, I think he's arguing that all great artists want to and need to believe in the product of their work, especially if they're trying to subsume all of the great as well as all of the not so great in the collection of their poetry. At 2b, I love that he does begin with exclamation points and ends with exclamation points. At 3a, go back and look at our study of Lingering Last Drops a few poems ago, and notice that the comparisons are quite unique. Finally, at 3b, to own a text like this, how will you know, as you age, that your creative work was important in the end? Is it about acceptance? Is it about fame? Is it about that you're capable of saying you did the best of your work? And I think for Whitman, all of that would be included in these final poems of reading. Thank you.